The first part of this evening is going to be me just explaining to you the schedule for the year, all right? Because there have been some very late registrations. In fact, registrations close on the 31st of March this year because of the issues that there were with Learn. So there are people even to this day coming onto the system. So if you're feeling a little bit unhinged or awkward or disjointed, okay, it's all right. It's not nice, but you're in an okay space. Just understand that. And as far as you are concerned, as long as you are connecting with me, you are in a very safe space, because I will understand your journey, your struggles, your process, and the university will be exceedingly lenient to ensure that you have more than enough time and resources to submit whatever you need to submit. All right. So that's my pledge to you. So I'm going to go off screen now, and I'm going to share with you a presentation. All right. And the first 2 slides of this presentation, and it won't take more than 5 minutes, is going to be talking to you about a suggested pacing schedule, all right, for the course. Some changes that were made to dates for submission deadlines for assignments, okay? And I'm going to share that with you. And just contextualize where you are with respect to your timing, pacing, important due dates. It'll take not more than 5 minutes. And after that, if you want to stay with me, I'm going to go through like rapid fire the first 4 learning units of the session. But before I do that, so in other words, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the schedule. Then I'm going to ask you if you have any questions. If you have any burning questions, you're welcome to ask it. And then, so just raise your hand virtually, and then I'll say, okay, please raise your question, unmute your mic, we can all hear it, and I'll respond. And then then I'm going to go into a very, very basic analysis of the first 4 units of this course, strategic management. And it basically reads like a story, and I'm going to basically contextualize for you where the story starts and where we are at learning unit 4. All right, so that's tonight. And that piece is going to be, I'm not going to be teaching you, I'm going to run you through it, and I'm going to indicate to you some of the key principles within the 4 units. So it's just a contextualization of what you're actually dealing with and looking at over 4 chapters. So if you, like at the beginning now, and you've just come on to learn and you're a bit frazzled, it's okay. You will see in a snapshot the highlighted sections of chapters 1 to 4 and what it's all about. Okay, I'm not saying it'll be enough in that session for you to be able to pass the course, of course not, but it'll really give you a good contextual basis for what the course is about, where it starts at learning unit 1, what are the important concepts, etc., running through to learning unit 4. Okay, and remember, learning unit 1 to 4 is the content for the semester's assessments, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let's get into a presentation which I'll share with you now. Let me know if you don't mind. Just give me a thumbs up as soon as you can see the slides on the screen. Can somebody, okay, thank you, Natalia, great. Okay, so Shot, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for your responsiveness, I appreciate it. All right, that's strategic management. Let me just quickly show you this graphic. Now, strategic management is about, it's about managing a whole lot of things, but essentially it's about an organization being, achieving a sustained competitive advantage, all right, above opposition. All right, setting yourself apart, and that involves managing and dealing with a whole range of different stakeholders, internal capabilities, strategies, positionings, the external environment, the planning around that, a vision, a mission, value system, communicating that throughout the organization to achieve desired objectives. All right. And somewhere in this process are a number of strategic decisions that need to be made, and we'll get through that. Okay, so that's essentially what strategic management is. Now, I wanted to share this slide with you. which basically brings you up to speed with where we are at the moment. All right. You will note that your first assignment is due on the 5th of May. I will also email this through to you. All right. And I'll also make a copy of this presentation. But if you want to take a screenshot, control print screen, then you can have this immediately available if you want it, or you may already, have received it. The second assignment is due on the 26th of May. Okay, so roughly 3 weeks apart. And your exam is unchanged for the 20th of June. All right. We're trusting that you're not going to need to write a supplementary exam and so on and so forth. So those are the key dates for the course. First assignment, the 5th of May. Second assignment, the 26th of May. And your exam on the 20th of June. Okay. Those dates were ever so minor, just minorly changed. I think it's a couple of days out from the previous date set for these assignments. Okay, so don't panic too much about these date changes. All right. Right, with respect to these continuous assessment tasks, the one important thing that I need you to understand is do not panic about this, okay? The dates that are given here are guidelines for pacing through this course, all right? So these are not deadlines for your submission. They are suggested guidelines for when you should submit, and if you submit on those days, it means that you are working at a good pace to cover all the modules, all of your activities and tasks, your readings, etc. And you will be fully up to date with respect to the course content and understanding what may be asked of you in an exam or an assignment if you follow this guide on the given dates. Okay, that's what this pacing schedule is all about. And of course, these are the tasks. Task 3.1.1, task 5.3.1, task 6.1.1, and task 7.1.1. There are 4 ICE tasks. Together, these count for 10% of your total mark. All right, so quite important and very important, in fact, for your own growth and education, your own professional development. These are quite important things to do. And even though they're weighted at only 10%, I would probably say their value is certainly disproportionately higher than 10% from a mark perspective. Okay, so well worth doing, but do not feel it like it's a lasso around your neck. Okay, it isn't. So essentially what happens is these will stay open on VC Learn until probably the end of May. Okay, and there will be a cutoff date when you need to submit all 4 of these ICE tasks. And that cutoff date will be around about the 25th of May. Okay, don't hold me please to this specific date. I could be a couple of days out. All right, but 25th of May, the way I understand it at the moment, is going to be cut off for all ICE tasks. Okay. Right, so that's then the importance of the ICE task. Luke, I'm glad you joined us. I was just sharing with the group that the ICE tasks, these dates given are just guidelines for submission of these tasks. Please don't feel threatened or frightened by having to meet them dead on, all right? You can submit them all at any time. You can submit them all at one go if you like, but at some point they're all going to have to be submitted by around about the 25th of May if you want to earn the 10% that is required in these ICE tasks. One comment to make on these, if I may, I note that because the application is fairly, if you want to interpret it, informal, whereas one is responding to these tasks online. I see that the language usage in grammar and spelling and sentence construction is very poor, okay? And in most cases, it's not up to 3rd year level in any course. So can I please advise you that if you really want to score better in your assessments and all of your tasks, please focus a little bit of effort in the way in which you communicate. Communicate as formally as possible. Okay, Luke, I know your signal is bad. No issue. I'll make a copy also of this video and I will share it with you. All right. So if you need to duck out, no problems. But thank you for making the effort. All right. So that's it about the ICE tasks. Okay. Now, some people who may not be on Learn or are struggling with accessing where the tasks are, all right, they are in VC Learn, all right, now, which means you're not going to find the question somewhere. Okay, I'm not going to send you the tasks because you need to be able to do the tasks online because everything is assessed online. It's very difficult for me to make an assessment if you send it to me outside of the system. If you send it to me outside of the system, I can't mark it within the system, which means the system doesn't understand that you've actually submitted. Okay? So again, it's very important that you are inside Learn when you submit these tasks. All right. I do understand that there are odd occasions when someone is literally pulling their hair out. They want to get moving on these tasks. They need to schedule themselves and pace themselves, and they don't have access to Learn again. All right. So I do understand that. And in those cases, I do send the guides, but it's going to be interesting to see how I take what you have submitted outside of the system and put it into the system when it's not my work. Okay. So please, I implore you, you will find these tasks on VC Learn under the learning units when you go into the learning units. They are listed, task 3.1.1. They are not under announcements. They are not under ICE tasks. They are in your learning units. Okay. So that's it for ICE. Okay. Right. Before we move further on that, are there any questions on the ICE tasks or any other questions that you may have pertaining to progress, evaluations, etc.? You're welcome to just raise your hand and then I'll ask you to just blurt it out. And if not, then for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to run through super quick learning units 1 to 4. Yes, Cecile. Yes, grammar usage and the way you communicate for ICE as well is very, very important also. So it's not just about jotting down a note or expressing a bullet point. But I'm not asking you to write a thesis at all right? And ICE tasks are about you interacting with the topics. So I've been very impressed, in fact, with the kind of responses that I've received from the ICE tasks. Okay, so very well done to those who have already submitted. But I'm imploring you just generally, just improve the way in which you communicate. For example, just check your spelling. Make sure that your sentence construction is correct at the worst case. All right. The better you can express yourself, the better whoever is evaluating you is going to give you a higher mark. There's without a doubt. All right. So yeah, it's just a tip. It's not a demand. Yes, of course. And so Cecile says it must make sense and follow in a logical manner. Yes, of course. Build an argument. That's very important. So don't just put down haphazard thoughts, all right, that are not weaved together. All right, very important. Build up an argument. State the obvious first. Then the next point that built on your foundation of your argument, and so on and so forth. It is really useful and helpful. You will find you are going to benefit greatly by doing that. So if the question, for example, okay, in an ICE task was do research on one of the any of the 4 or 5 organizations with respect to their strategic direction, and based on your discussion or your investigation, list 2 areas that you would suggest for resource allocation, for a resource allocation decision that supports the strategic direction of the organization. Okay, so it would be useful for you to indicate that you understand what the strategic direction or priorities are of the organization before you answer your 2 resource allocation items. Okay, it's exactly what Cecile had said. So first start at the beginning and say, based on my research on Pick n Pay is a retailer of consumer and household goods operating throughout South Africa. It does online sales and it does retail store sales. It does liquor sales also. Its strategic priorities, according to its integrated reporting framework or its annual report of 2021, include improving customer satisfaction levels. 2, increasing bottom line profit. 3, showing rapid or concern for the environment, okay, if that were one of their strategic priorities. And then your resource allocation follows, because it speaks to the strategic priorities that you've already identified now, that you've researched. All right, so that's what Cecile is saying, and I think you've actually all got it, but you need to be building a coherent, logical discussion and argument. Start at the first and you end not at the beginning, but down the road with respect to your arguments. All right. Right, we're now getting to the part where I'm going to be running through learning units 1 to 4. Okay, and it's going to be rapid fire. I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes per learning unit. All right, and I'm really just going to give you a taste or an overview of what is in each learning unit, and these learning units follow the chapters in the textbook. So learning unit 1 is chapter 1, learning unit 2 is chapter 2, and so forth. The very first chapter is introductory to the concept of strategy, how it developed, what's the nature of strategy, what's the role of strategy, all right? And it picks out a couple of interesting issues or aspects. Now, I put this graphic up here because if you don't know, these are soccer managers, and managing a soccer team or a soccer club is a huge business which involves a lot of strategy. That's why there's a lot of chess pieces in the front of this thing. And it's called the Battle of the Grand Masters, all right? So it's about positioning an organization for success. Not necessarily to be the best. Best in what? How can you be the best? Really, you want to be your best, all right? You're wanting to be positioned ahead of your competitors on a sustained level. In other words, not just short term, but for the long term. You're wanting to be generating superior profits or returns over a long term, which is called sustained competitive advantage. Sustained competitive advantage. It's the purpose of strategy. A couple of important concepts I've already mentioned is sustained competitive advantage. There's some questions that people ask when they're developing strategy. Where are we now? Where do we want to go to? How do we get there? And then how are we doing when we're reporting about what we're doing? Okay. And those questions are actually answered in the chapters that follow. All right. The 5 Ps, Mintzberg's 5 Ps, plan, ploy, pattern, position, and perspective, is a very popular framework for reflecting different aspects of the nature of strategy. Now, these 5 Ps they are not mutually exclusive. In other words, they could all be applicable within a specific company, or one may only be applicable to a certain company or case study. So an organization may be, let's look at, for example, strategy as a ploy, or the second P, all right? So you may get a case study where a organization is in a sense trying to outwit or outsmart a competitor through a tactic. For example, maybe it's purchasing open land on a certain spot simply to keep the competitor from taking that spot, even though they themselves don't want to build an outlet there, as an example. It's a ploy. Hannibal, remember Hannibal the Conqueror? He conquered Rome by moving with elephants over the Alps. It was a shock tactic, and the tactic worked. The Romans were just not expecting that. They didn't think it was possible. All right. So a plan is a business model. All right. It's a planned strategy. So strategy could also be about a plan, how an organization configures itself. All right, we all know business models, essentially how an organization operates, what model it operates off. Uber is obviously a online hailing taxi service. All right, that's a mode of transportation, whereas another organization is a car rental agency, works off a different business model, but the principle is the same. People need to be moved from one point to a next. All right. There are other organizations that would operate in that space that are not yet operational in South Africa. For example, carpooling, where you hire a car for a period. In other words, you drive from A to B and you park the car there. Somebody else climbs in, drives it from B to C, parks the car there, another person climbs in. So these cars are networked throughout the city and people are using it as and when they require it to be used. All right. So there are different business models and there are 5 Ps. They can, in fact, all operate together, or they may operate independently. Perspective is about when an organization sees an opportunity in turning around, reframing something that another organization may not see as valuable. There's this little YouTube link here is about an organization in Newfoundland. It's a tourism organization that has used strategy, the perspective aspect of strategy to grow its tourism business. It's a very sleepy, very small town, population of a couple of hundred, but it's used that to its advantage by targeting consumers who value privacy, quietness, quaintness, cuteness, lack of crowds, okay, perspective. All right, so on and so forth. The 5 Ps, important concepts. The other important concept in chapter 1 is perspectives on managing strategically, and they differentiate between an inside-out approach and an outside-in approach. Okay. And really, this is quite simple to explain. An inside-out approach is when an organization pursues a strategy that is based on an evaluation of its own internal resources. So in other words, it says, look, we are really, really good as an organization. In fact, this is an exact example of Apple. We are great at building phones. So we are going to create the best phone for our customers because using our capabilities, our innovation, our track record, etc., our technology platforms, we are going to give the customer the greatest because we've understood our own capabilities internally and we believe we can leverage them to meet the market. Right? By the way, there's no good or bad. An organization may employ an outside-in or an inside-out strategy. Organization that employs an outside-in strategy considers the needs of the market first. All right, Jerome, I will share the slides under more resources. All right, so here these organizations are considering the market first, not their resources. They're looking at market needs and they're adapting or acquiring their resources to match the market needs. All right, an outside-in approach. First seeing what the market needs, what the market opportunity is, and then adapting, rather than an inside-out. There's no right or wrong, but there are merits and demerits for both cases, and you may be required to discuss this in an essay question. All right. Yeah, we're still talking conceptually, all right, about strategy and strategic approaches. Okay, it's just more detail on inside out and outside in. Then there are 5 tests for a winning strategy. Goodness of fit, did it build competitive advantage? Did it improve organizational performance? Did it meet the expectations of stakeholders? And does it have what socio-environmental impact does it have? Okay, 5 questions that one can ask for building a winning strategy. Of course, the silliness about a strategy success is you only really know whether it's successful afterwards. Okay, which lends itself to its own challenges, and we'll pick that up in fact in chapter 4, and we'll get to that where we talk about how do we discern what is going on in the environment and in our own environment, okay, in order to make a winning strategy that is, that is actually winning. All right. And it's based on business intelligence and competitive intelligence. All right. Intelligence external to the organization that we get, and information on the organization internally, business intelligence. Okay. There are paradoxes in strategy, which means there are things that apply. Again, it's not an either or, but it's a yin and a yang. They both work. All right. Strategies can be based on the past, or they can be based on the future, or a conglomeration of both. They can be intended and emergent. This is very important, in fact, because an organization that isn't able to adapt or shape or shift its strategy, its intended strategy, is going to really struggle when there's a disruptive force that takes place, like COVID, for example. There, you cannot continue in your intended strategy. You need to emerge your strategy or shift it. All right? And it becomes an emergent strategy. It's not an either or, they work together. Reactive or proactive. Are you looking ahead as an organization and preempting changes or disruptions? Are you being proactive, or do you respond? Are you reactive to what has happened in the environment? I'm not sure that anybody could have predicted really what was happening in COVID. I don't think there were many people that could have predicted what was happening now with Russia and Ukraine. But it has both of those issues have had a profound influence on the world and many, many businesses. However, if there was a strategic process in any organization that was doing an environmental scanning or analysis, they could be proactively shifting their strategies to mitigate the risks of these kinds of disruptors. We've spoken about the inside out and outside in. And then, of course, this massive paradox of, does an organization exist for profitability or sustainability? That means, i.e., that is the purpose of business to create profit for its shareholders, or is it to meet the expectations of stakeholders? Shareholders versus stakeholders. Okay. And of course, the answer is both. Learning Unit 2, moving on. Okay, this was just what a review from the previous week. Okay, so the purpose and context of business. And so chapter 2 looks at the context of the strategic decision-making process, or the organization strategy. Okay, this is Learning Unit 2. And it says, for example, there are things that are taking place in an organization's environment that it cannot avoid. It cannot just close its eyes to. It's enveloped in this concept called the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is a geopolitical epoch, all right? A time in history like no other, when for the first time in history, humans can have a profound influence on the earth and its resources. When I say profound, debilitating and devastating effect. All right, and we know this through climate change, social inequity, so on and so forth. Okay, so these pose a socio-ecological risk to organizations. If, for example, all the trees are cut down, a paper mill may not have the opportunity to make more papers or cardboard boxes, pretty simplistically put. If all the water is poisoned, then the water bottling plant of fresh water is going to possibly go out of business. Okay, eventually when all those resources dry up, excuse the pun. All right, very, very simple concept that you can't keep on draining resources to the point where they no longer exist, or they are so scarce that they become prohibitively expensive, where the consumer looks for alternatives or substitutes. Okay, so there are socio-ecological risks that organizations need to consider in their strategies. Okay, but organizations also see these socio-ecological risks as an opportunity, not just as a risk to be mitigated, but as an opportunity. And the opportunity is in creating shared value. All right. We're going to get to that now. I'm going to quickly talk very, very briefly about the organization's purpose and this debate about whether it's for profit. What comes first, an organization's profitability or its purpose? Okay. Must it be good for shareholders, the investors, the owners, or must it be good for stakeholders, society? Okay, and again, the answer is both. Okay, there's a shareholder approach and a stakeholder approach, which I've already referenced. Okay, this is a simple graphic talking about how does one, if there are a lot of stakeholders that require attention, and in the context of an organization, there are many stakeholders, and how does one determine who to listen to? Because there are so many stakeholders that are impinging on the organization's operations. We demand this, we require this, okay, and this is a matrix created, which simply says, if you look at the y-axis, where the level of power is naught at the base, going up to high on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, the level of interest of the stakeholder. In other words, its interaction and connectedness to the organization is naught here at its base and high here at its base, sorry, low here at its base and high as it goes forward. Okay, so if you take an organization that has a high level of power over here, okay, and a high level of interest, you will find that it is in the top right quadrant, and these stakeholders need to be managed closely. Those stakeholders that have a low level of interest in the organization and a low level of power fall in the bottom left-hand quadrant, which is simply just monitor. Okay, don't get too fluffed up, but just monitor them. Okay, spoken about the Anthropocene. Here we're speaking about context as an opportunity. So if an organization seeks to meet the needs of the socio-economic environment, in other words, is good for the environment and is good for people, all right? If an organization seeks to address those kinds of problems and creates shared value rather than capturing value, it creates shared value, it would, in the theory states, will be profitable. There's an opportunity in the context of these risks, and if one meets the demands or the needs of, for example, environmental risks, by applying innovative products or projects, and by meeting the needs of perhaps the most impoverished parts of our community, which instinctively an organization says, look, this is not our mandate. We don't want to get involved with customers that don't have money. Why would we be involved there? Okay, that is when you're seeing the context as a risk. Those organizations that see the context as an opportunity say, you know what, 70% of South Africa's population is rural. Yes, these people are earning a low base, but 70% of 60 million people is 50 million or 40 million, whatever the figure is. 40 million people, each contributing a fraction of what an ordinary wealthy, so to say, percent of the population would. And suddenly you've got your numbers. So let's go and service that community with our products and services in an innovative way. By creating shared value, we invest in infrastructure in those areas, and it's going to cost us initially. It's going to cost us. We cannot be focused here on a short-term solution. That would be short-termism. We're not going to get hooked up on short-termism. We're going to rather be focused on long-termism, because that is where the opportunity for sustained competitive advantage is. Sustained competitive advantage over a long period of time, not today, not tomorrow, not as a tactic, but as a strategic direction, as a strategic approach. And there are many examples of organizations that have created shared value opportunities with organizations, and the slides that follow are in fact all about that. but I'm not going to bore you with that. When you get these slides, you can look through at them at your own leisure. And this level of detail is not required in your learning. It's really just for your understanding. And understanding shared value is a critical aspect of the business landscape at the moment. So in other words, organizations have moved from giving handouts, philanthropy, which was called philanthropy, to corporate social responsibility, which was also just giving in a structured way, to what they now call shared value, creating shared value. And that is adopting business plans and business models to meet the needs of these pressing concerns for human equality, human upliftment, and environmental upliftment, even though it's costly, with a view to earning returns. It's the value is shared, right? It's not one way, it's not captured, but in the same breath, it's not about an organization losing money. It's actually a capitalist process, creating shared value. Quite an interesting concept that. In a way, it's socialist, because you are giving some of your wealth, in a sense, sharing it, sharing your resources, sharing your knowledge, but you're also capturing value. Okay, so it's creating shared value. Okay, and that's going to take us towards the end of Learning Unit 2. Let me just keep moving. Okay. Sorry, it takes a little bit of time for these slides to load. Okay, then the chapter ends towards saying organizations are required these days to report, obviously, not just on their annual financial statements, but their sustainability performance. Sustainability means environmental and social impact, and that's often incorporated into an integrated report. And here are some links which talk more about integrated reporting. ESG is not part of your course, but it's a very, very interesting measure for an organization's performance on environmental, social, and governance issues. Most listed companies, in fact, all listed companies on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange are required to report their sustainability performance, and there are many rating agencies that actually give a score to every listed company on these three items, E, S, and G. So you have a score for each, and you have an overall score, but that's not important for your learning, it's important for your broader education. Okay, balanced scorecard is a very important principle, and that is that an organization now is not just measuring its financial performance, but it's measuring performance across 4 critical areas. Okay, I think I may have skipped a slide somewhere here. Okay, but we'll get onto that again. Okay, it's measuring performance not just from an economic perspective, but you'll see it's measuring itself against a triple bottom line, not just one bottom line, not just the bottom line, 3 bottom lines: social value, economic value, and environmental value. Okay. All right, speedingly going into Learning Unit 3. All right, now this unit is really about saying there's no point in having a strategy if everybody in the organization has not bought into it by first understanding it and then being able to implement it. All right, so how does an organization implement its strategic intent? And it does that by communicating its strategic direction through vision statements, mission statements, and value statements. Okay. And this next section just talks about the differences between the 3. What is a good vision statement? What is a good mission statement? Okay. And this is really what this whole session is all about. But I think if you focus on what is a good vision and what is a good mission statement, you're going to be in good shape. This is obviously bread and butter stuff for every organization. You yourself may be invited to discussing the company's vision or mission, or even its values. All right, and in this section is quite useful to understand. Okay, so these slides just give you a whole lot of examples over and over again of mission and vision, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, very, very important. An organization is required to obviously implement its strategy. So the vision, mission, and value statement are tools that assist an organization in implementing that strategy. But when it comes down to the implementation process, it makes sense for the organization to be able to break down what exactly needs to happen within the organization from a practical operations perspective day to day in order to achieve that strategy. You with me? So in other words, a strategy is worthless if it's not being carried out. And how then is the strategy being carried out? And a balanced scorecard that an organization creates is a critical mechanism to achieving that. And a balanced scorecard measures 4 areas: financial performance, customer perception, the organization's own processes, and the organization's learning and development. These 4 areas are what essentially are the 4 areas in which an organization maps, lists, actions, and key performance indicators that are specific to implementing its strategic direction, its vision, its mission, and its values. If an organization values its customers and wants to grow its customer base, then it needs to implement certain KPIs, key performance areas, indicators, within this customer segment. All right, like for example, it will measure it by customer returns, customer complaints, customer perception audits, so on and so forth. Okay, as an example. Now the next couple of slides give you some example. That's just the 4 areas explained once again, and these are just some very basic templates for scorecards. Okay, and you can just enlarge these as you do your areas. So you will see the 4 areas are listed down the x-axis: financial, customers, business operations, and the one at the bottom here is learning and development. And the organization would put for each of the 4 areas the strategic objectives it has and what were the key performance indicators for each objective. There could be several key performance indicators for each objective, targets per year as an example, all right, and so on and so forth. You don't need to get into too much detail in this for your learning, but you see how useful it is as a framework, but you would need to understand this. Okay, is going to come up. Okay, once again, this is a different example of balanced scorecard. So here you can see it's been filled in. Satisfy shareholders. Okay, this is about profitability. So the objectives are to increase customers, increase order size, increase frequency, increase new product revenue, and the measures or the key performance indicators: numbers of customers, what is the increase in, what's the targeted increase? Average sale, what is the targeted increase? Frequency of sale, what is it? So on and so forth. More examples of business scorecard, and you will see that we now start integrating E, S, and G into that balanced scorecard, where we're also measuring the environmental and social impact of our operations can also be included in there. Okay. All right, takes us to Learning Unit 4. We've got 10 minutes left, and we'll go through this very fleetingly. Learning Unit 4, in a sense, starts a new section for this course. Learning Units 1, 2, and 3, we're talking about what is the concept of strategy, what are the perspectives, what is its role, what is its nature, and it builds up to a point where you understand what strategy is. And now Learning Unit 4 and Learning Unit 4, 5, 6, and 7 starts talking about how does an organization make strategic decisions. Strategic decisions. Now, a strategic decision is not a normal decision. A strategic decision is a decision that is significant, that if the wrong decision is made, it'll have incredible consequences for your organization. It's not a routine decision, okay? And they can be about big changes happening in the organization. Okay. There are three processes of decision making: visionary, experimental, and rational, but all of this learning unit 4 focuses on a rational process of decision making. And the premise is that organizations, in order to make a rational, remember now, rational is cognitive, cerebral, lack of noise, factual. Okay, so this chapter is saying the best decisions are made rationally by an organization. Rationally means the decision is devoid, it doesn't have political interference. When I'm talking about internal to the organization, people vying for different power, decisions that benefit their own bottom line, their own silos. There's no emotion attached to the decision. It's entirely rational. Okay, and there is a rational decision-making process. There's about six or so different steps of how this process unfolds. To make a decision of this kind of nature, remember we said it's not a routine decision. It has massive consequences. A process is required. This decision should not necessarily, it could be a visionary decision, it could be an experimental decision, but most strategic decisions are rational and they need to follow a specific process. Otherwise, you may not make the appropriate decision and the consequences could be catastrophic for the organization. Okay. These are some slides straight out of the textbook. Okay. Essentially, it's saying here, all decisions are made in the context. Okay. And that context is made up of the characteristics of the decision team, the people making the decision, the characteristics of the organization, the characteristics of the external environment, and the characteristics of the decision to be made. Okay. So all of those need to be considered in the context of the strategic decision-making process, but that process is fed by this big rectangular box in the middle by strategic decision enablers. Those things that enable a decision to be made, it aids the rational thinking process. And what are those enablers? The enablers is big data. Okay, it's access to information. An organization cannot make a rational decision outside of a whole lot of information that it needs to gather. All right. Competitive intelligence is information based on the external environment, and business intelligence is based on information internal to the organization. Okay. And here you can imagine companies have access to major amounts of data, depending on its size, obviously. And it then there's concepts like, for example, data warehousing and data marts and data extraction and mining that comes into play. How does one make sense of the information that is at an organization's disposal? Okay, that's where this chapter is going, and it doesn't tell you exactly how it is. It just explains in concept that these are the enablers of information, of strategic decision making, and organizations that are astute at it require masses of information. They need to warehouse this information, clean the information, so to say, and then extract it for use by the strategic decision makers. Okay, it's got to be coherent, clear, and understandable in the context of the decision being made. Okay, that's business intelligence. Of course, competitive intelligence is about environmental scanning and looking at the external environment, competitors, the technology environment, regulation, and so on and so forth. And within that environmental scanning or outside focused information gathering process, there is a competitive intelligence cycle, all right, that you can look at and maybe referred to in a question. Okay, so these are the enablers. You can see all the data sources that enable an organization to make a decision. Big data, business intelligence, competitive intelligence, spoke about CRM, social media, and media, and they need to be integrated. They need to be integrating mechanisms, and these integrating mechanisms could be people or technology all right, and they lead to strategic decisions. This is the strategic competitive intelligence cycle. Remember, competitive intelligence is about the external environment. You identify the decision to be made. You identify what kind of topics or information you need. You have a plan for how you're going to collect this information. You then collect it and evaluate it, and you then analyze, and you have insights on it, and it feeds back into the process. Okay, this is environmental scanning, and it's important to continue to do environmental scanning on an ongoing basis so that you avoid disruptions, shocks, and ploys of competitors when you are yourself making a strategic decision. The consequences of a poor decision of which would be catastrophic for the organization, or certainly massive. Okay. All right. That's not particularly important. All right. And so we're ending now. Learning Unit 4. And it ends off with this topic of saying, how do we improve the quality and speed of strategic decision making? And there are a number of activities that one does that. You want to avoid anything here that adds noise to the system. You want this decision to be as rational as possible. All right, but there are there's 6 or 7 points that that make that possible. Okay. Okay, folk. I know I've spoken so much. I hope that has really given you what it could only have given you a very broad overview. I hope it's given you a sense of comfort that actually this is within your grasp. This has not got, it hasn't run away with you. You've still got a lot of time to deal with it. And it really is a very, very cool course. You can see it's very practical. So if you're in an institution, in an organization, and you're working already, you can already start picking up that there are key things that apply to you in your professional life. So I'd really advise you to dig into the topic. It's very exciting and very practical and relevant. And I think your assessments are very much based around integrating information. So if you understand the concepts, you're going to be well set. And that comes through doing those learning unit tasks and the ICE tasks, which are going to add real value to you. Folk, we're at 2 minutes to 8. Are there any questions at this stage? Otherwise, I'm going to close off and thank you very much. And then I will advise you when our next contact session will be. And it'll probably take a similar format where I'll just give you, bring you up to speed about where we are in the course. Is there anything you should be concerned about? Is there anything that's going on in my head that's not going on in your head? We are aligned about what's going on, so you don't have to feel disconnected. Of course, you're welcome to ask questions as you go through the learning process now. You're welcome to note questions and send me emails, or when we connect at our next collaboration. It's always useful to have questions that can be answered in the context of a group. All right, guys, any questions before we close? Bianca, thank you very much. Thanks so much, guys, for making it. I know it's not easy for you. Please don't panic, okay? just I'm here to communicate with you and be the connection. Jerome, that was a hell of a lot to digest, okay? I've just been over four chapters of this thing with you in what, 15-20 minutes. But it just gives you an overview of what's going on. It is a lot to catch up on, but you will be able to do it. You really will be. Try and enjoy it, and don't do it just as a chore to go through it, if it's at all possible. It's going to be helpful to you. Worst case scenario, start with the ICE tasks, because that'll require you to read back. Okay, so if you do your ICE tasks, you're probably going to be all right. Fanele, thank you that you also don't have a question. I appreciate all of your attendance. Please, you're welcome to communicate with me, like I said. But I think just want to put you at ease. You're in good shape. Keep in touch, keep working at it, keep plodding at it. Just make sure that your coherency and the logical expression of your arguments is well put down in your assessments, and you are going to score well. Okay. It's important that you are showing that you can express the thoughts that you have. which I know you have in your mind, but you also want to express it well. Guys, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Cecile, you won't see your ice marks until right at the end, probably. So I actually hide that column. I hide the column, but everybody is scoring very, very well. Okay, don't have to panic about it. Each of my assessments is actually based on an evaluation of out of 5. So if you really just don't do it, you get 0. If you do it well, you get 5. If you do it mediocrely, you're going to get 2 or 3. All right. So that's my scoring system. But I try to give people full marks for the effort, as long as it's a genuine effort. Okay. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. I'll share this video with you during the course of the week. Yeah. Have a super week. Cheers then. Bye-bye, Cecile. Bye, everybody.